Welcome. Today we're going to talk about implementation. Implementation is a big word, really, for how do we do the work of the law. Implementation is how do we get the policy into the field to bless or benefit the lives of other people. How do we write rules to implement or understand the law? And when we talk about implementation, we have to remember that sometimes government agencies do the work of the government. Sometimes we hire contractors to do that work. Sometimes we partner with nonprofits. And sometimes we rely on different levels of government to get the work done. So how do we actually do it? And this is a real significant issue because there are a lot of people who think about big laws. They think, oh man, it would be so great if. But then the devil's in the details as we try to actually get that work done. So when we talk about implementation, we're talking about the programs that governments do and the results that they produce, especially as we talk about how do we report and really evaluate programs. So in implementation, we're trying to figure out how to set these goals, how to achieve those goals, and get that work done. Well, I teach a class on program evaluation. And on program evaluation, we say, well, how do we judge to see if a program's working? We should just compare the goals with the outcomes. That's great, except there are lots of problems. The first one is actually the bullet 2, that goals actually might evolve as we start doing the work. So in other words, as we start doing the work of that program, as we start trying to get our agency in line, we start realizing that what we're doing isn't probably going to end up at a goal. So we start changing that goal. Well, we had the program intended to do this, but really it's going to do this better. So let's change the goal of that program and really work on it in this way. Or we might find that as we're implementing, it's not achieving its goals very well. And we say, well, what is it actually doing? Oh, well, it's doing this other thing really well. Okay, well then what we're going to do is we're going to take that program and really say that this is what it was designed to do, will look good, and will be successful. So that's one of the things. The other thing is, how do we actually measure the stuff that we're concerned about? Because we could have success in one measurement criteria, but failure in another. Let's say, for example, did we spend enough money? So we took the money, it was given to us by Congress, by our city council, by our state legislature, and we spent the money on housing subsidies. Great, we spent every penny of it. Awesome. We took the money, we're supposed to spend it on housing subsidies. We did it. Program success, right? Well, yeah, but did we serve enough people? Well, I don't know. So we measure the number of people we served, and we maybe measure the amount of money we spent. So we might be successful in having spent the money, but not served as many people as we wanted. Well, maybe that's not actually what we really care about. Maybe we're talking about actually a reduction in crime. So we spent some money. We spent all that money. Great. We served a whole lot of people, but did it actually create a change? Did it reduce the amount of crimes? Well, I don't know. What about lives saved? Maybe it's not just about crimes. Maybe we're concerned about saving somebody's life. Well, all of these things might have different measurement criteria, how we actually evaluate what the program is doing, and we'll judge success based on these different criteria. So that could be really, really difficult. And in fact, we have some programs that will never be able to achieve their goals because they're not designed in a way that's going to reduce whatever it is they're supposed to do or increase whatever it is. So they could be spending money and being accountable and serving tons and tons of people, but never make the change because the program doesn't give them power to make the changes, or because the program that they're administering won't ever solve the problem. Say, for example, if we were doing some sort of healthcare problem, and we're serving tons and tons and tons of people, and we're giving out lots of vaccines, but the vaccine itself is ineffective, then we're not going to see reductions in the incidence of that illness. It has nothing to do with how we're running the program. The vaccine is just not good. Well, that's not really the agency's problem. So there are lots of these really, really complex things that make judging success and failure a really difficult thing to do. And the two standards that we hold for judging success and failure are often efficiency and accountability. Efficiency is really about getting a bang for a buck. Is it producing an outcome for a lower cost? Or are we doing it in a timely manner? Efficiency is a ratio between some sort of output and input. The other thing is accountability. Accountability has a trade-off with efficiency. Are we responsive to the people who've given us power? Are we serving the needs of the clients very well? Are we holding ourselves to these accountability standards like fiscal accountability, like program accountability, like process accountability? And interestingly, this inverse relationship between efficiency and accountability holds up because as we increase our accountability, it slows down our processes because we have to now check more boxes or talk to more people, and that's good, right? But it reduces our efficiency. And if we want to increase our efficiency, we're going to do more and more and more, and we're going to serve more and more and more, but ultimately we're going to check in less. We're going to ask fewer questions because that slows us down. And so programs have to balance efficiency and accountability. So between efficiency and accountability, we have these really two different standards we have to meet. Now, there are a lot of things that can go wrong in programs. We can not know how to actually achieve our goal. In the textbook, they say, idealists may frame laws, but realists have to administer them. Lawmakers are out trying to solve problems, and they're great, right? They want to, stop childhood abuse. They want to reduce the, crime in some area. Great, that's awesome. But they don't have the special expertise to do that. What they can do is they can write laws, and the laws can give agencies power to do that work. The agencies then have to translate that law into something that they can do. Well, if the law is not written in a way that gives the agency power to do the things it needs to do, then the agency is going to be helpless to try and do it. The other thing is the agency itself might not know how to reach a certain standard. So for example, if we've got to hit, a clean air standard and the EPA is given power to do that, how do we hit that standard? Well, the EPA might not know. They might have some guesses about how to hit that standard, like adding more fuel efficiency standards or changing the emission capturing devices or trying to work on production processes that will reduce the amount of pollutants that go into an atmosphere in business. But who knows? It's like a crapshoot. You never know which one's going to work and which one's not going to work, which one's going to drive up problems, which one's not. And so sometimes agencies are given really unsolvable problems and they just try to do their best. I think about education reforms. When we think about how to improve student performance on standardized testing, some of the biggest predictors of those things are actually out of the control of the school districts. If school districts can wrangle teachers, they can do curriculum, they can do all sorts of engagement with the students, but some of the big predictors about student success are, did the student get a lunch or a breakfast? Did they get enough sleep? And is there a good learning environment at the home? If those are the biggest predictors and we are trying to improve student performance, that's largely out of control of the school district. So how do we do that? We have this unachievable goal, but we begin given the task to do it. So there's some uncertainty about how to reach those goals, especially when it's out of control of the agency. Then we have to consider the fact that agencies have budgets and they have staff limits and they're tasked to do a variety of different things. And so as we try to take some law or some new policy and go and get it done, that has to stack up in some list of what are our priorities in our organization. That leads to uneven leadership problems. Like if we have a leader who's really, really committed to student success initiatives and that leader leaves and we have a new leader who's not as committed, that gets bumped down in the priority list. It doesn't mean that the program is bad. It just means it's going to get less attention. If it gets less attention, it'll probably get less money or resources, less time devoted to it. The program's not going to perform as well. Okay, well, there's also organizational problems that interfere with program handling. So if we have to coordinate with different programs, this also relies on, different levels of government and the private sector. We have project partners. We have federal money or state money and local money. We have different directives on how to do that work. Let's say we're also partnering with a nonprofit who's going to go out and do their work. If the values are not in alignment between the nonprofit and that organization, then that organization is going to be doing kind of things off on their own way, and we're going to have to kind of manage them back. So as we start working with different organizations, different leaders, as we partner out with other people, this becomes kind of a very difficult task to manage to try and get that program done in an effective way. So we can have all sorts of program performance problems that really are out of control of the agency, or at least are very difficult for an agency to manage, and it might turn out that the program does underperform because of just simple management problems. So let's think of an example of federalism. We talk about federalism a lot early on in the chapter, but we have large intergovernmental programs. So we have federal policies that provide resources to the states. The states then also take those policies, they have to do those. They work with the federal government to do those policies. They also add state money. They may have state rules and requirements. And then they send some of that to local governments, and the local governments have their own priorities and initiatives. And so we have these intergovernmental programs like environmental protection and clean air. We have education programs that start at the federal level. They go through the state. The state, chops them up and reorients their goals and tries to get money from federal programs that will kind of be related to a state program. And they take that federal money that is specific to a specific program and they use it in the state government, but they're kind of shifting the focus of it to something different. And then by the time it gets to local government, it may not look like anything that the federal government wanted to do. Now, because of federalism, the federal government can't often force states to do things. But what they can do is they can sweeten the pot. In other words, they can provide money or incentivize states to do things. That thing I was talking about where the federal government would send money to the states and the states would use that kind of in a kind of related fashion. They call it fungibility. Fungibility is like where a grant that was extended for one purpose is slightly modified to be used on something else. So if you watch the Hurricane Katrina video called The Storm, they gave Homeland Security funds to New Orleans, and those Homeland Security funds that were maybe supposed to be on interoperable communications but to build capacity inside their agencies. Someone said, well, we need other capacity too, like our K9 units need bulletproof vests. That relates to Homeland Security because we're going to go and look for terrorists, and so we can use the federal money to do our local thing. We take this money that's a little bit flexible and we flex it out to use it on a different purpose. That's called fungibility. Now, federal grants can come for a really specific project-based grants. They're chosen one by one to meet an objective. Now, this could be like a local government applies for a very specific federal grant to increase, art awareness in local schools. And they put together a proposal. The local government has a really, really specific thing they want to do with that money. And there may be one winner across the whole U.S. or maybe 10 winners. So they apply for that federal grant. The federal grant comes back. They win, and 1,000 other groups don't win. Well, how often does that take place? It happens routinely. College professors all apply for a real specific grant to do a specific function. When they apply, they're competing against 200 other proposals. And the federal agency that's funding them will choose the one that best fits what the federal government wants to do, and they award that one winner. Well, that means that 200 or 199 people who applied at the same time didn't win. So, at least at our campus, we hire people to help us write grants. We hire people to monitor to make sure that what those requirements are on those specific projects are being met so that we can win. And that means that well-resourced schools, well-resourced local governments who can hire good grant writers who have a track record of winning, they end up winning more. And that's what leads to what's called grantsmanship. And grantsmanship is really trying to game this system so that you win more of these project-based grants. There's some really great ones that deal with art projects. There's some really great ones that deal with Homeland Security. But really, it's a way for the federal government to achieve an objective, implement a policy, do a thing, and we get to have all sorts of input on what that might look like, but they only pick one or a very few chosen winners to get that done. The other way that federalism works in implementation is based on formula-based grants, and formula-based grants go out to everyone who meets the criteria. So if you filled out the FAFSA form, you had to put in your income, your parents' income, and then it generated a number for you if you wanted to go to school about how much money was available, either in a grant or a loan. Cool, right? Everybody who wants it gets it based on how well they meet the requirements. The federal government does this for transportation, for highways. They do it for education. They do it for Medicare. So as the states take federal money to provide for healthcare for older people or for lower income people, they get a certain dollar amount based on the people that they serve. And when we go through and do things like the census every 10 years, those numbers about number of homeless, racial disparities, income disparities, women-owned businesses, all these sorts of things, all that information ends up going back to the federal government and may qualify us for certain formula-based grants. So if we meet these criteria, extra money comes to do a specific task. There are other things